So first, I'll present how we conceptualize the kind of capacity building we intended to do based on the different dimensions of capacity building, especially noting that the long-term goal is to establish partnerships and collaborations between BOL institutions, have opportunities to exchange ideas, practices, and economic and social capital, essentially helping each other reach an improved and better version of higher education, teaching, and learning in our respective institutions and the overall higher ed landscape in the country. And then next, I'll focus on describing the key features of CBOL initiative, focusing on the first phase, since that was designed to be the capacity building program. During the conceptualization stage, we started with a series of discussions on how we view capacity building in relation to our role in the Open and Distance Learning Act, or RA 10650. And we shared the view of Lammert, Johnson, and Fiore, asserting that capacity building can be seen as a change process targeted at aligning beliefs and new or refined practices with desired growth targets within an organization. And the CBOL team agreed that to be effective, organizational capacity building requires deliberate and planned change. We recognize that the best practices for capacity building include long-term, multi-level approaches, coaching, and even feedback. But the question remained, how should we go about it? So we asked ourselves, what aspects should we attempt to cover? We sort of had the tentative answer to that by looking into the dimensions of capacity building. At least in the field of education, change usually involves developing 4 types of capacity, from human to material. And in the design of CBOL Phase 1, we primarily wanted to touch on human and organizational capacity by targeting the participants' skills and knowledge to some extent, but more so their will and interest to implement changes needed by providing spaces to interact, collaborate, and communicate with each other. And we worked on the design thinking that the supposed changes in human and organizational capacity may then lead to changes in the structures, such as the institution's policies, procedures, and practices, as well as resources or the materials needed to implement such changes. So these types are interdependent, and we do recognize that when we designed CBOL Phase 1. We also recognize that there may be some HEIs which may have been implementing a form of BOL, even if they're not stating it as BOL, declaring it as BOL, even prior to the pandemic. And therefore, they've already determined their desired capacity and levels. The knowledge, the skills, the structures, and processes that need to be in place, or they've in fact already applied necessary systems. But there may also be those which are still exploring. So in terms of levels and stages of capacity building, we were conscious of such diversity. And in terms of outcomes of capacity building, of course, at the very least, we hope that as they go through or after completing CBOL Phase 1, the institutions will make transitional outcomes or changes that will bring them towards their desired state. Aside from the dimensions of capacity building, we also reviewed other UPOU initiatives concerning capacity building, since CBOL is not naman the first. So we critically reflect on UPOU's many years of experience in providing training programs in BOL. We know that various training modalities have already been utilized, including face-to-face seminar workshops, fully online courses, and blended training designs. We've had formal and non-formal programs and courses, such as our graduate certificate in distance education and master's in DE. We have offered MOOCs even prior to the 2020, the pandemic, and even some sessions in our academic conferences, such as this one, NCODEL and ICODEL, have been designed to serve as forms of capacity building. During the COVID-19 pandemic, there have also been a few institution-based engagements, involving workshops customized for particular institutions. Specifically, those programs and activities were under Reflex, as well as I mentioned, massive open online courses or MOOCs that were offered in coordination with CHED, and that those programs had hundreds of teacher participants. But the focus of these training efforts has been on improving the individual practice of ODEL at the classroom or course level, although there were already a few which targeted teacher trainers. But overall, rather than the components of program or institution-wide BAL implementation. So for CBAL, we aimed to foster effective BAL practice within institutions and across the BAL ecosystem through three phases, as mentioned early on. We invited private HEIs, SUCs, and LUCs. We hope to attract those which share the same vision and have the same long-term targets. We wanted to go beyond providing training, which is phase one, to mentoring institutional partners and building a network of institutions engaged in co-mentoring and sharing of resources for effective BAL, which is phase two, until such time that we can confidently say that we're going towards the third phase, or the ecosystem, as described early on. And because of our previous efforts, they addressed only the first and most basic elements of capacity building, which is training. We felt that beyond training, practitioners and institutions, they still need guidance and support during the process of BAL implementation. So we looked into the differences between the focus of training for individual BAL practitioners and training for BAL programs and institutions, which would involve more than one faculty working on a specific subsystem, for example. And the table in this specific slide and the next two slides show these differences. So for example, in terms of instructional design or ID, we recognize that an institutional capacity building program should go beyond course or learning activity design and focus on a program design at the very least. In the same manner, student support, facilitation, assessment, and even content or instructional materials development and technology should go beyond course level concerns, such as individual teaching and assessment strategies, but should turn its attention to setting up or beefing up the systems, for example, system for learner support, for examinations or assessment, in general, for LMS, and so on and so forth. Okay. The result of our review, intensive discussions and reflection, is a 6-module program, but there was actually a 7th, which meant to discuss how BAL can be sustained. For each of the 6 modules, clear outcomes were phrased as essential questions to be addressed. We prepared the virtual learning environment through Model, our platform for MOOCs, and placed all module study guides with a variety of relevant resources, as well as discussion forums, polls, and submission bins for the asynchronous activities. Within 14 weeks, there were intensive synchronous discussion via Zoom, focusing on not just sharing of practices, but also of engaging in critical discussions, problematizing issues and concerns about a specific module, topic, or subtopic for a session or two. Then, as mentioned, we invited private HEIs, SUCs, and LUCs, expecting to work with those who are serious, committed, and bent on making lasting change. So we asked for a maximum of 7 representatives, preferably the academics who may influence change in their respective units, and a total of 23 institutions made up of 149 individual participants from different regions in the country responded to our call. The majority, or 61%, are publicly funded HEIs, 35% are private HEIs, and 4%, or just one college, actually participated. While there were evaluations for each module, overall, when asked which topics were most and least useful and relevant for the participating institutions, considering their current situation and short-term direction, these were the responses in the slide. It's interesting to note that technology management was both the most and least useful or relevant, which may allude to the diversity of the participating institutions and how some may have already invested crucial resources in this particular aspect or subsystem prior to and during CBAL phase 1, and therefore would see the need to focus on improving other subsystems. But some, they they still prioritize this. I'll end this. This is going to be the last slide. After CBOL Phase 1, we'd like to emphasize that we do recognize that this phase is just one of the many possible initiatives and movement towards building a ball ecosystem. But we also noted that through the experience, beyond formulating clear policies and reestablishing systems, ball requires collective rethinking of institutional thrusts and critical reflection on institutional culture and values, and how these can inform as well as undermine the ball strategy. To deal with organizational and systems issues associated with transitioning to ball, long-term commitment to building trust among members of the institution is required. With that, I'll end this presentation. Thank you.